Okay, Sarah, yeah. How pregnant are you?
I am at 36 weeks. So I have 2 to 4 more weeks because I'm not going to go past 40. But yes, I'm extremely pregnant. And I was just saying, I was on the Daily Show podcast a couple weeks ago, and I've been kind of keeping my pregnancy off social media. But like, it's a shot like this. It's like, portrait style. You could definitely see that I'm pregnant. So I guess that's my coming out. But yeah, it's very pregnant. I'm very pregnant.
Very pregnant. Yeah. That's why we had to squeeze this in. I like moved boulders for this time to be able to meet with you because I knew if I did it one day later, our chances get lower and lower every time.
I mean, we
And
could do it from the hospital. That's going to be probably the most chill time, those couple of days that I get to be there. And, people are taking care of me. So,
yeah, it's actually quite delightful in the hospital. I loved it. I loved all the room service.
I've given birth at this hospital. When you give birth on the Upper East Side in New York, this particular hospital gives you a Chanel gift bag when you leave, apparently.
Oh,
So, looking
fancy.
forward to that.
Fancy. Very nice. Yeah. So Sarah, we have to disclose that you're my cousin and you're my first family member that I've had on this show.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
Wow.
Yeah, you beat out
Take
my
that,
dad.
Uncle Rob.
Yeah, Uncle Rob, my dad, all the other people that could be on. And we actually have a shared, this is something that people don't know much about with me, is that we have a shared lineage of a lot of creativity in our family. Our grandparents were artists. Our great grandfather was a well-known portrait painter. Our shared uncle is an artist. Our shared cousins are very creative and making documentaries and doing all sorts of cool stuff. And then my sister and I are kind of off on the side, not doing as many creative things, but creative in our own ways.
Okay,
And
writing a book is kind of creative. So,
there's creative aspects. So, but I wanted to talk to you because I think of you as being super creative in the arena of comedy and the arena of producing and directing, and you've been creative since you were just a little girl. I totally remember that about you. And how wise effort plays a role in that. Like what is wise effort in the domain of creativity? So that's something we could talk about.
I love it.
Tell us a little bit about what you do because you work with the Daily Show. What does that mean? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I've been at the Daily Show for a while now. I started in 2016, which was a really interesting time to start. Um, you know, we were all very excited for Trump to have this funny campaign and then go away. And then we were all very surprised on our election night show when that didn't happen. Um, and yeah, before that, I've been working in comedy for a long time, and sort of at this intersection of like comedy with real people. So I came up through a lot of reality TV. I like to tell people that I have like the most embarrassing resume you've ever seen because I just was part of that early 2000s, just working on the cheesiest reality shows and having so much fun. And
Is there like food truck reality TV and yeah, like what
Oh, I
was
would say I'm very proud of the food trucks. No, I mean, I worked on like Bad Girls Club and Bridal Plasty and a lot of dating
Oh,
shows. And
okay.
I was attacked by Sebastian Bach while I was working on Celebrity Fit Club. Worked on the two Corys, rest in peace, Corey Haim. So I got to work on a lot of like really interesting reality shows, and then my passion was always comedy, and so I sort of found myself exploring this weird intersection of like doing comedy with real people who sort of know they're on a comedy show, but they're kind of being themselves, but they're in these uncomfortable positions that we've put them in. And so then at the Daily Show, it's been very similar with a little more of like a political bent, although we also do talk to like people who believe in Bigfoot and are trying to find him. So my job as like a director, producer, writer is I'm finding these interesting stories or interesting characters and then thinking of, okay, how can we amp up the comedy? What are some jokes we can do? On the Daily Show, we have these correspondents who go through the story. So it's like, what's this person's kind of journey through the story? And sometimes it's a more serious political story. It's like, okay, what do we do to make, climate change funny? How do we get people thinking and talking about abortion in a way that is sensitive, but also, I really believe that comedy is. I learned that in film school, they would talk about like sugarcoating the pill. Like you can really get through to people using comedy in a way that you can't necessarily do dramatically, because when somebody laughs, they kind of open up for a minute. And I do think that, some of the pieces I'm most proud of from The Daily Show are about really serious issues that are important to me. So a lot of the work is just finding out, how do I take my experience of what makes me outraged and what makes me laugh about this story and try to convey that to an audience.
I was watching your video on paying athletes.
Oh yeah.
And it was so timely because I was watching that video in preparation to talk to you. And in the New York Times just today, they came out with a statement about how athletes are going to be paid. And you have this really creative way of I think what you ended up doing is you bring a bunch of, there's like a scene where like as if you were a construction worker and your boss was telling you that you're not going to get paid for your work. And then at one point the athletes say, well, yeah, that's that. Okay, we can do this, but maybe like you don't get paid, right? And the boss is like, no, I make millions, right? So this coach is making millions, but the athlete not making anything. And the way that you used the scene, the comedy, all of it actually it actually shifted my perspective a little bit around paying athletes. So these are short bits, and I don't think people, and I didn't know this until talking to you. We think that the comedians that are up there, Trevor Noah, we think that they're writing their own stuff, but they have a lot of writers behind the scenes that are. Are you allowed to say this? That you're kind of writing what they
Yeah, I mean,
they say?
there's a
Yeah.
big writers room on the show, definitely. I mean, it's yeah, it's funny. I A piece that I did won a Webby Award 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, and I remember it was like Trevor Noah wins Webby Award, and I'm like, Trevor Noah, like he wasn't even in the piece. It was like Michael Costa in the fields, and I was directing him, and but of course it's like you yes, like the face of the show is sort of the show. And now that we have John back, I mean, that's even more. He's like the Daily Show guy, even though he's only on once a week. So yes, we have. I think our writers' room is maybe 12 people, and then my side, we do a lot. We do everything that's sort of out of the studio. So we do the sketches, field pieces, all that kind of stuff. And then I'll bring in writers sometimes to punch up pieces. Or in the case of that sketch, that was fully written by the writers' room, and I was directing on that. So but yes, totally. There are people writing all this. I actually just today I had a piece on about this guy who's like a huge Joe Biden fan. The joke was like, we found the one guy who loves Joe Biden. And I did have multiple friends like, so is this a real person or is this an actor? I'm always like, no, these are real people. They
They're real
really
people.
are. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, so Sarah, this is the kind of thing that most people would feel, um, I don't know, like this is an intensely pressureful filled experience to write for something that millions of people are going to see. And also within a group, other people are probably reviewing each other's ideas. And I feel like one of the places that is pretty vulnerable is trying to be funny. Because what if you're not funny? I had a comedian client once, and there was so much anxiety about getting up. She was stand up, but like getting up and standing up there and it not landing. So, how do you deal with that? Like in terms of the creative process, the fears, anxieties that show up?
Yeah. I mean, that's such a great question. I think it's really interesting. So just talking a little more about the writer's room, I remember there's this sort of stereotype of what a writer's room is like a Hollywood sitcom writer's room. It's usually a bunch of like funny white guys all trying to tear each other down, and a lot of sniping and a lot of politics, and a lot of, if it's not funny, you get your butt kicked. And when I started at the Daily Show, so each morning we have this morning meeting where, they'll play clips from the stories of the day, and writers, producers, whoever's in the room will kind of like throw out ideas or make jokes off of the clips. And the first few times I was in that room, I was just so struck by like, sometimes people would throw out a joke that was like a dud and the room wouldn't laugh. And there was no one calling them out. There was nobody being like, shut up, Joe. Oh God, no, Joe. I was trying to think, I was like going through my head. I'm like, I can't say Jimmy. I can't say Steve. I'm just trying to think. I'm like, of course,
Or
Joe.
Joe.
Not you, Joe. You're
Or
always
is it
funny.
Joe?
We love Joe. Um, I should probably, yeah. So it just really struck me that when there was something funny, people would immediately kind of build on it and jump in. And when there was something that wasn't funny, there was no, it just fell. And it was like, okay, next, and I was so grateful for getting to experience a writer's room like that, where, people were just taking their ego out of it. And it was 100% about, I mean, when you're making a show in the morning to go on the air that night, there's not a lot of room for like, boo, we have to keep going and making jokes. And, and I think in terms of the fear, I mean, God, I was terrified. I don't know if I spoke in that meeting for years because, I would speak in my smaller departmental meeting, but that meeting is really intimidating. And yeah, that fear of not being funny. I mean, I think when I first started out at the show, I was really, really careful about what I would say because it's like you don't want to be thought of, everyone's judging you because they don't know you yet. And now I've become a little more of a person where I will just try to, a lot of times people will bring an idea to the meeting and they're like, I'm not sure. Is there anything funny here? Is there anything good? Could this be a story? And I will, anything that comes to mind, I'll just throw out there because sometimes it's not funny, but it leads to someone else having something funny.
Yeah,
Um,
there's sort of two pieces to that that feel important. One is the context that we're in that can support our creativity. And in order to be creative, you have to be in this sort of liminal space between the edges of what you don't know. Like you have to enter into those edges of what you don't know, the sort of the wandering space. Like we could try this, and also be able to build on what you do know, right? And that in order to do that, you have to have safety. There has to be some degree of safety. We're not going to be super evolutionarily, we're not going to be super creative if we're feeling threatened. It's like, no, we're going to go back to what we know, and we're not going to skirt those edges. And so there is something about that room that's probably designed that way. Like they've learned, no, we have a limited amount of time. People need to be as free as possible to express themselves so that we can build on that expression. And then there's another element where you were quiet for a long time. So you were avoiding, maybe putting your ideas in, but now you see the benefit of, if I throw an idea out there, I'm actually part of a group, part of a collective idea generating machine. It's not just your own idea. So much so that it's not your idea that we think it's Trevor Noah's idea when we see him say it. Yeah. So you're letting go of ego a bit.
yeah, yeah,
There's sort
yeah.
of a
Oh,
no self. And
definitely.
we're gonna talk about Buddhism, Sarah, but this is like there's some no self in that
Yes.
space.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, that's really the key. I feel like just that constant letting go of the ego is so much of the work. I mean, especially as a director, because when you're a director, the whole thing is geared around your ego. Like you look at like Hitchcock or Truffaut or Tarantino, it's like you you're sort of in this space where everything revolves around you, but the most important thing is just, constantly checking in with yourself, like, is this working? Is this not working? How can we find the right way through together, like with the crew, with the talent. So it's, but yeah, so I will just go into ego 1,000 times when I'm directing. Oh, it's not funny. It's my fault. Oh, it's ego and it's fear. It's like, oh, it has to be good or else I'll look bad versus like, hey, just saying out loud, like, this isn't working. What can we try?
Mhm. Yeah. So there's a willingness there to just keep trying new and different things until something lands. What was interesting to me, I looked up a little bit about creativity and the brain and what's happening in your brain when you're in that creative space. And there's one that it's a unique time where two systems of the brain, which usually don't work together, they usually work in opposition from each other, come together. And so one system of the brain is the mind wandering system, the default mode network. And that's like when you're actually really not being mindful. When that default mode network is active, you're just out there. And this is like when you're on a run and a great idea comes to you, or you're right when you're waking up in the morning and you're kind of in that semi sleep awake space. And then the other system of the brain that's active is the control center of the brain, much like this executive functioning. And when those two come together, you get this experience of creativity, because creativity is to create something. It has to have, there's like a product associated with creativity, and creativity is a process. It's both. So it's both mind wandering and producing at the same time. And I'm curious, when do your most creative ideas come to you? Because I imagine there's some that happen in that room, but I imagine they happen in other places, unexpected places for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the first person to say definitely the shower. Taking a
Oh,
shower is always like a thing that helps me um find that. I do think that with comedy, a lot of it is the room, a lot of it is talking with other people, because when you're kind of generating jokes and ideas, it comes from a conversation, and seeing somebody's eyes kind of light up, or seeing where somebody, you kind of lose somebody, like that helps.
mhm.
I think a lot of it comes from actually kind of trying to shut down the judgment and just lean into like what is funny. Before I was a director, I was a camera operator. And like a lot of that job is, finding, just figuring out what's the best position to be in for a shot. And so like for instance, when shooting B-roll, it was always like, okay, I'm looking at this beautiful view, and you can just drop the camera at eye level and shoot what you're seeing because you know it's beautiful. But the tool that was really helpful was digging in, like, okay, what do I specifically like about this view? And then how can I adjust my camera position to emphasize that? Which
Mm.
sounds really basic, but it was very revelatory for me. Like, okay, the thing I love about this view is the bridge that I'm seeing has this really interesting shape to it. And the clouds are really beautiful. So, okay, I'm going to go on a low angle. I'm going to emphasize the bridge, and I'm going to shoot a time lapse so that the clouds are really the focus of the shot. Like little things like that. And with comedy too, it's a similar thing. It's like taking, okay, what's this joke? What's the thing that's funny about this joke? Do I need to see the person's whole body to understand like how much they're struggling? Do I need to see their face like contorting? So it's like having that moment of, what do I think is funny about this? Or what do I think is important? Or what do I love about this? And then how can I tweak the way I'm showing it to emphasize that detail?
Okay, this is good because I think therapy is the same way.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, I
It's like
would agree.
your client is this whole view, right? They're going to come in with their, and then this week, and then my mom did this, and then my sister did this, and then my brother's blah, 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 and then and they just like spew the whole story. And so that's like the whole view. It's a beautiful view. And as their therapist, I'm sure I'm listening to content because I don't want to miss anything. Like I want to make sure they
And you're
know what
like, you
they're doing.
talked about your mother.
Yeah,
Is that
content
like the banana peel of therapy? Like, you always throw out a banana peel, have someone fall. It's like, let's just go back to the mother.
often, often. But you can also miss a lot if you just go to the mother, right? So you have to pay attention to where's the bridge in the clouds. And the bridge in the clouds is, when is that client either picking up the pace and talking about something that you can tell brings them a lot of vitality. So you want to go for that. Or what is the client circling around, but not really touching, that you want to zoom in on and slow down around because there's something that they're avoiding there that is really the meat of the matter. Right. And that's the lens of the camera. So we could think about that in terms of creativity. I mean, I think this is kind of interesting, is that you could use that camera lens in all sorts of things. Like if you're a coach coaching sports, or if you're bringing creativity into a leadership situation, the practice of pointing your camera in the right spot and there's a curiosity aspect to that, but then there's also a purposeful nature of it. Like you're putting it there for a reason. You're focusing on the face for a reason, or you're focusing on the body for the reason, or you're focusing on the mother for a reason. Just you don't blanketly always go to the mother. There's lots of clients that I haven't talked to them about their moms at all because they have
Well,
great moms
that's
like yours.
very
Yeah.
reassuring. I've talked about my mom a lot in therapy. Hi, Mom. I
Oh,
love
really?
you. Yeah.
Oh, what would we say that is? What are you doing there? Zooming in,
I would say it's about refining. I think
refining.
people think of comedy as this very instinctual, subconscious thing, because when you laugh, it's involuntary, it can be a surprise, but there's such a craft to it. I think that refining process is so important with all creativity. I feel like as Americans and as sort of Western people, we have this idea of like, you're either a genius or you don't have it, and
Hmm.
we talk a lot with like teaching children to work hard rather than like, you're great at math. Say like, wow, I see you working so hard at math. And and I think as a creative person, the most destructive thing you can believe is like either I'm a genius or I'm not, because it's there are so many things you can do to increase your sensitivity and that refinement and that experience and that like um it's a process of making the thing better and better and better. I mean, I think I whenever I bring something in to edit, you shoot the piece and you're like, this is brilliant and we got so much great stuff. And then you get into edit. And when you're working towards that director's cut, you're like, oh my God, we totally failed. We don't have anything. This isn't funny. This isn't good. And then you're just like tweaking and tweaking and tweaking and fixing and like kind of like a gold miner panning for gold, trying to get rid of all the little bits. And then, you can really have something great, but you can't get stuck in that part where you're in the woods and you're in fear and like you're like, this sucks. We didn't, all you're seeing is the mistakes. So I
Yeah,
do
that's
think
when
that,
people bail. That's when people bail. They
yeah,
get into that woods and they're like, it's not good. And therefore I am. That's the I
yeah,
am statement where you get fused with some kind of content of who you are, whether you're a genius or not, or you're good at math or not, or whatever. And then you bail.
yeah.
And then you don't and also like you try and do it by yourself rather than bringing other eyes in to help you get to see if there's something in here to mine the gold of.
And
I
that's such a
remember,
huge tool too. I mean,
yeah.
I feel like I will try to talk through the story before I go out and shoot. I'll try to talk through the story with people and just get a feel for not only how they're reacting and where they're leaning in and where they're sort of losing interest, but also how I'm feeling. You know, like you said, talking about a client who kind of gets vitalized by one thing and then kind of like doesn't want to talk about something else. Like that's a really good way of me finding the roadblocks before I'm even going into production, because I'm able to just feel instinctively like, oh, I kind of, I got the ick at this beat. Maybe it's not as genuine as it could be. Maybe it's not quite what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, so there's a good amount of emotional intelligence required to be a comedian. Like you need to have that awareness of what other people are feeling, being able to climb in their skin or being able to be attuned to their facial expression or their feedback that they're giving you and using that as your tool for refinement.
One of my favorite Daily Show pieces I did, it was like one of my earlier ones. I think it was in my first year working there. It was about this subscription box for racism. So it was like Hello Fresh, but it was a box, this monthly box for like mostly white women to like learn how to be anti-racist. And I remember the
I think I
first
might have ordered
interview.
this box.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was awesome. I'm so sad it's not there anymore. It was these two um really sweet black women activists who were in Michigan. And so we went to interview them and I felt like we had so many great jokes. And then that interview, I think I ended up using like maybe one joke, and the whole interview was just them talking about what they do, and then Roy Wood Jr., the correspondent, like making faces. And that was such a huge experience for me, realizing, you could write the funniest joke in the world, but the thing that's funny is watching someone be surprised, watching someone like have a feeling. I mean, comedy is just such a visceral thing from the gut that that was a real surprise to me. Like I was like, no joke is as funny as Roy Wood Jr. raising one eyebrow.
Yeah. What you said there about comedy is so visceral. I would say much of the things that capture us in terms of creativity and creative expression it's a body-based, nonverbal response. It's hitting that system before it gets to our thinking system, which is like, was that funny? Or what were they trying to do there? Right. That comes second to just the reaction that you feel seeing the piece of art or yeah, seeing a facial expression. That's good. And then there's also a good degree of letting go, because if you're taking something and you spend all this time making all these great jokes, and then you're kind of, okay, I'm willing to just let go of them all to be able to have this piece be really funny, even if my jokes aren't in it. And I feel like that is a practice of the letting go of, like, you can put a lot of effort into something and then it's almost like one of those, the Buddha's sand mandalas, right? Like all these days
Yeah.
they do this out here. My dad always wants me to go to these things with him, where they spend 3 days making a sand mandala and these little tiny detailed dropping of colors of sand, this beautiful piece of art. And then this is from a Tibetan tradition where the Tibetan Buddhist monks take it down to the ocean and they just let all blow away. And a little bit of that with what you're doing, a little
Yeah.
mandala making.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think one thing I want to mention too is, I think comedy is such a male kind of world. And I do feel like becoming a mother has really changed my point of view there. And because I had a lot of, and I just want to say that too, because I had a lot of fear about becoming a mother, and just like your brain changes and you become softer and you cry more easily, and it's like there's all these things that change. And I found too, like after I had a baby, I didn't feel as sharp. I felt really kind of fuzzy, and it was hard for me. It became a lot harder to like write a hard joke, or like I was just worried like, oh my god, am I not funny? I'm just become this like serious mom.
Mm.
Um But one thing that I did start to notice was that my sensitivity and facial expressions was like dialed up to 11. And I drive the editors at work crazy now because I will just be like, that reaction shot, I need like 10% more disgust and 10% less like shock, and I do think that it has made me better at that, being able to take the temperature, or know when I have a performance, because yeah, your brain just gets reformatted so that your focus is just on this one little person's face and how are they feeling and how can I discern this type of cry from this other type of cry. So it actually is very helpful in working in comedy, of like seeing that those little subtleties of performance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, your threat system and your bonding system are activated, right? So you're also more alert to what looks potentially threatening and how to protect your child, and then you're alert to signals of safeness or safety, and a lot of those come from facial expressions. I mean, what I learned from Stephen Porges about polyvagal theory is that all these little lines around our eyes sends signals when we smile that we're safe. And I had a couple in my office, and she was so frozen from so much Botox, like she had no. And he was just sitting there. He's like, I just feel like she doesn't see me. I just feel like she doesn't love me. And I'm like, it's because she can't smile.
Oh man.
I'm like, just lighten up, like 20% lighter on the Botox next time, and all your couples therapy will be resolved. You won't have to come back. Whereas they say the one between your eyes, if you're a parent, hit that one hard, because that frown, the wrinkle between your eyes, you want to
Oh
do
yeah.
less of that,
Oh
because then
yeah.
your child thinks that you're always mad at them, right? So this is but
Wait,
you're
no, this
super
is
attuned to
great. What
that.
do I have? I don't have that much eye stuff. I noticed that the corners of my mouth have started to turn down. I'm like, I don't think I'm like
Oh,
sad all the time, but that's
no.
the one that bothers me now. I'm like,
Yeah, this is what we share. This is our genetic lineage, Sarah. I'm sorry.
okay,
It comes
okay,
from
good.
Grandma
It's just
Eleanor.
genetic. Okay, it's from Grandma Eleanor. Well, she was
She was,
amazing. So,
yeah, she was amazing. She was never mad. She just, you know, sloping of the lip downward. So you just smile more, you know. But yeah, these are things about, yeah, motherhood. And gosh, I mean, you're going to be coming back after maternity leave to like a hot mess of an election that you are
yeah,
responsible to write for. How are you going to do that? I mean, what are your thoughts around creativity there, and even how you handle these hot, heavy topics that it's like hard to be funny about. You know, it's like hard to
yeah,
be funny about war.
yeah.
And
Oh my gosh, it's so much harder to make a joke from a place of sensitivity, um, and it really narrows your ability to be funny. It's interesting. We were talking about 2016 and starting at the show in 2016. I remember I wanted to do a piece about like our country being so divided. And it was like a week before the election. And I was like, let's go to a Trump rally and a Hillary rally and tell people, okay, in a week, we're going to all be one country together. So can you just say something nice about the other side? The piece was
okay.
called like One Nice Thing. And it was like Jordan Klepper just like pulling teeth, trying to get these people to say one nice thing about Trump or one nice thing about Hillary or even one nice thing about their supporters. And, it was just the fun of it was just watching people squirm and being like, I can't say anything. Um,
But these are the same parents that are on a playground saying, go share that toy without being forced
yeah,
sharing,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. And it was so funny too, because I remember the whole time we're cutting the piece, we're thinking Hillary's going to be the president. And then the piece aired, we're shooting our live show at 11 o'clock and we, are kind of 20 minutes into knowing that Trump is going to be the president. And all these jokes that were just like the softest jokes that were so unfunny to us that morning. This girl who says, when Trump says build a wall, I say let's build you into the wall. Like it was such a dumb joke, huge laughter. And then all the jokes that we thought were so funny of just like this crazy stuff that these Trump supporters are saying, like no laughs. People are just like, oh my God, this is our life now. So it's also just the what is funny can just like change in a heartbeat. And part of it is like understanding the mood that people are in. There was a piece I did that was called Who's to Blame. That was like a week after the election. That was uh, this sort of interrogation type thing where you bring in this guy and he says, okay, it's millennials' fault. And then he had written this whole think piece about how millennials are at fault because Trump won. And we say, okay, let's bring in a millennial. And then she is actually revealed to be the writer of another think piece who said, you know what? It was not millennials, it was white women. Okay, let's bring in a white woman. And then she says, she's actually the author of the think piece who said, and it was this sort of like Russian doll thing of all these Democrats pointing fingers at each other because that was like kind of how everyone felt after that election. And then I remember we screened it for Trevor and he was just like, people are too sensitive to see this right now. The tone is too kind of silly, people are just really so scared and hurt and sad right now. I don't think we can put this on. And I was so mad because I was like, but it's so funny. Like we're all just blaming each other. It's so useless. But that was this moment where he was just very sensitive to like, what is the mood and how can I speak to an audience in an empathetic way?
And how flexible are they to be able to go into that type of creative humor? I mean, I've had that with clients in like a classic thing that you'll do with an OCD client is you make them do the very thing that they're like afraid of doing, right? So something like a hand washer, an obsessive hand washer. I'll make them like, I'll walk them like down to my trash cans and I'll say, okay, let's touch the trash can. And then after you touch the trash can, put it all over your face
Oh my
and in your
gosh.
hair and down your arms, right? And then let's go touch the trash can again, right? So
As a New
like that's
Yorker, this is like really alarming me. This is like as disturbing as when my child started licking the subway poles and I'd be like, please don't do that.
yeah, right. So there's some healthy OCD, and then if it's running your life that you can't like, you have to like walk large circle around a trash can. And there's a time and place for that, right? Like you can do that if you've gotten the person built up to touching the trash can, like there's enough flexibility and space and reason why you're doing it and intention around it, but not just because you're in New York and we should all be open to germs, right? Like that. So there's something about, yes, it's about the mood, it's about the context, and it's about the openness. Is how open are we to being shifted in some way? Whether it's, like comedy can shift the way you see something, like me watching that video that you did around athletes getting paid. I mean, that's not like it's not a super passion project of mine of like whether athletes should get paid or not, but I felt a different way after I watched it, you know? And so, yeah, there's a space that we need to be in to be able to be creative and also to receive other people's creativity.
Yes, definitely. And I've
Mm-hmm.
also noticed too, audiences have really become a lot more sensitive. Like
Yeah.
the uh when I started at the show, there were a lot of voiceover jokes we would do about people's appearance. We'd call some guy like Elmer Fudd in the voiceover. And
Mm-hmm.
we don't do that anymore. And just seeing too, like, um yeah, audiences are more sensitized. They really don't like anything that feels like punching down. And, I think there's a lot of older comedians that are really upset about this and like, oh, it's, snowflakes or comedy isn't like supposed to be woke or whatever it is. But it's sort of nice to be challenged. You can't just go for that like lowest common denominator joke. It's more fun to, have to think of like, okay, how can I be funny and kind at the same time? And I
Right.
know too, there is a moral element of this, of like there's a line that you don't want to cross. And it's a weird thing when what your job is like kind of making fun of you. I mean, we will do like hidden camera stuff or, kind of gotcha stuff, but there has to be like a sensitivity. I really appreciate like Ronnie Chang, who's one of our correspondents. He, before every interview, says to the person, like, okay, we're rolling. If you don't want to look stupid, don't say anything stupid. Just know everything you're saying is being recorded, And I mean, it's like, sure, that goes without saying, but I just appreciate that type of, kindness. And I think I hated that at first. I was like, don't say that. They're not going to say something stupid. Don't worry. They will say something stupid. It's fine.
Yeah, well, it's informed consent, which I think is part of also the ethos of what we're kind of swimming in. Being informed about what we're stepping into or, choosing to be in a certain space. And so much of, gosh, if we like think about our childhood experiences around comedy, it's like you're a single child, Sarah. But let me tell you about my older sister. Like, I was the source of her entertainment, right? And so that it kind of goes back to that feeling of, wait a minute, the way in which we maybe had fun was at the expense of somebody else hurting. And do we want to perpetuate that? Or could we use comedy in a way that we're shifting ideas and perspectives and moving people in the places that they wouldn't normally move to? Like, wow, can you think about something nice that you could say about Hillary's following, or you think something nice you could say about Trump's following? That's not hurting anyone. That's actually getting people in a humorous way, getting people to look at the ridiculousness of ourselves, that we are ridiculous. And you're just highlighting that.
Yeah.
But not to be mean, to illuminate. I love David Brooks, his book. He talks about illuminators, people that are illuminators, that they walk into the room and they illuminate others. And I think comedy has that potential in some ways, creativity. Okay, Sarah, we're gonna wrap.
Okay, great. This is
But
such a
before
fun interview. Thank you for having me on your podcast. It's
wait,
a dream.
before we do that,
Oh, sorry, I'm hanging up.
before you list all your places that we can find you, the hospital that you're going to be at with your Chanel bag.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
if we were to go back through what we just talked about, what are the highlights? What are the takeaways?
I mean, that's That's tough because I just like to immediately forget things after I say them to avoid the embarrassment of having said anything. Um, I get self-conscious and stuff like that. I'm curious to know. I would love to hear yours. And then can you go first and then I'll go if there's something that
Yeah.
you.
Um, I felt like, ooh, this part is good when you were clearly pointing to places that you've used comedy and your creativity to make a statement about something. And that you're actually making statements about things on the show. This is the most political show that I've ever had, and I have to air it because you're my cousin. But
It's okay.
I
You
don't
can
usually
edit it
go
all
there
out. I
in
know.
Switzerland when it comes to politics on this show, but
Yeah.
that's okay. Everything Sarah said, I had no association with her whatsoever. Just, but I actually really like that. I dig that, and I felt it from you. And then there was moments where I was just sort of engrossed in your story because I think I can envision these scenes that you're talking about because you're a good describer, and it was fun. It just was fun to hear the creative stories of things that you've made in your career at such a young whippersnapper. You're my younger cousin.
Yeah. I mean, I I just want to say like it has been such a long road for me and I feel like there are some people in comedy who just are so naturally confident and just throw themselves out there. And often it's people who are like in front of the camera. That's not me. I'm like behind the camera person. And I hope that, you know, people will just give themselves some space to be creative. And for me, the biggest thing has just been trying to let go of the fear, trying to let go of the judgment, and that yeah, that like opening and that just letting things be kind of bad until they get good and that having that beginner's mind, like that to me is just the most important thing. Because, there are just so many funny people who give up because it's really hard. It's like a very hard industry. And yeah, that ego death of like I mean, it's not an ego death, but that ego blow of when you say something you think is so funny and nobody laughs. Like you have to do that a million times to get funny. And I just want people to know that you don't have to be perfect right out of the gate or know the thing. And I do think that, yeah, like the stuff we talked about, just about communicating with other people, bringing other people into the process. Like you brought up, um, getting other people's feedback, asking for counsel and being humble and open to not even being open to criticism, but like asking somebody to look at something and make it better. Like that to me is so important.
Yeah, feedback. I did a show a while back on feedback, but I think feedback is essential. That whole 10,000-hour rule is bunk. It is not true. You can do the unhelpful thing for 10,000 hours and you're not going to get better at it unless you get feedback. Right. So we all need that feedback. Okay. Well, thank you, Sarah, and enjoy your last few weeks of being a parent of one. All going to
Yes.
change.
Yes. Well, Sean is also a second born. My husband, Sean, is also a second born. So I'm just hopeful that he will help keep the bullying and the weird power dynamics of like first and second child to a minimum because
Yeah,
he knows that pain too well.
I know. As second borns, we always kind of, the youngest child we protect. But it's good. It's good to get a little beat up every once in a while. Just minor, like minor beat up.
But a noogie,
Stronger.
just a noogie.
A nuggy, few
Yeah.
names called. Okay. Good, Sarah. So good to see you. Thank. And is your podcast out or not yet? Is this
No, I think we're
no?
going to release in the fall, but
Okay.
you can find me on sarahhamblin.com. That's where I put my work. Or then I'm not the best with social media, but I'm probably most active on Instagram at Frabjabulous. So
FRABJABULOUS.
yeah,
Frabjabulous. Okay.
yeah.
Good.
But
Go
yeah,
check her out there.
sarahhamblin.com. That's usually where I put all my work and
Good.
try to upload stuff there.
Yeah. Go check it out. Okay. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Wise Effort podcast. Wise Effort is about you taking your energy and putting it in the places that matter most to you. And when you do so, you'll get to savor the good of your life along the way. If you would like to become a member of the Wise Effort podcast, go to wiseeffort.com. And if you like this episode and think it would be helpful to somebody, please leave a review over at Podchaser or call me at 805-457-2776. I would like to thank my team, my partner in all things, including the producer of this podcast, Craig, Ashley Hyatt, the podcast manager, and thank you to Ben Gold at Bell & Branch for our new music. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and it's not meant to be a substitute for mental health treatments.